Thank you all for coming to the second half of the Sounds of the Underground. And I just want to introduce our speaker. I'll introduce her talk, which is Do the Dance, Indie Sleaze, Bloghouse Clubs, and Emo in SoCal. Kristen Martinez is a PhD candidate in musicology as well as a vocalist and archivist. She earned her bachelor's in history with a minor in religion, her master's in American Indian Studies and musicology at UCLA. Her work examines subcultural movements in San Gabriel Valley as well as ephemera, nostalgia, placemaking, music analysis, and identity with a focus on punk, post-punk, heavy metal, and emo. Her family is from Sonora, Mexico, and she has grown up in San Gabriel Valley area. She has also created a DIY digital archive, Indigenous Punks Archive, to document punk in Southwest with flyers, photos, videos, and information on bands. This archive has been included in the Punk Rock Museum and in Las Vegas, Nevada, and Denver Art Museum.
Wow.
So welcome, Kristen.
Yeah. Thank you for having me, Cal State LA. I'm a SGV native. I'm from Rosemead and El Monte, so a lot of my work is a love letter to the SGV. Some of the Inland Empire I lived in for a little bit, so hopefully this is interesting to you. I just kind of wanted to give you some of the sound that we're going to be hearing, some of the scholarship that I'm doing for my dissertation. This is one of the chapters, actually it's a mix of two chapters that I have going on. This is, my dancing chapter, as I say. We're going to discuss some things, but I feel like the SGV, Southern California with emo and subcultures doesn't get a lot of credit. So I kind of lived this. I was a punk rocker, but I kind of experienced this kind of happening in high school and after high school. So it was a time, and it's really interesting to kind of take a look at this. So yeah, we're gonna get into it. I'm gonna give a little bit of the emo background of the SGV. That's cool. So emo, for folks that aren't familiar, and Andrew did an awesome presentation previously to mine. Emo is a genre of rock music, short for emotional hardcore. It really originated with the hardcore bands in the Washington, D.C. Scene. Minor Threat, Ian MacKaye didn't really like it. He called it stupid. But for the most part, the emotional lyrics that the bands were doing, this is kind of what gave it its name. The themes, some of them mental health, as Angie discussed previously, personal struggles, loss, failed romance. There's a specific kind of, there's breakdowns, there's screaming, but there's a melodic nature, some kind of R&B style of the vocals. There's vulnerability and earnestness. I like to look at the themes. I try to pick apart what I kind of noticed. But there was waves in New Jersey. There was a big, Thursday, bands like that, My Chemical Romance. Then you had your Midwestern emo. But then we're gonna talk about SoCal. There's some subgenres that come out of there. So one thing I would like to know, growing up in Rosemead, the SGV, in the 1990s and the 2000s, there were some emo bands, indie bands going on. I want to give them the recognition. There's Light the Sky, Running Late. You have Audio Karate. They were doing this in the 1990s. Latino, Asian bands that were playing places in Whittier, Alhambra, El Monte. So they were doing it before it was cool. So this is, in the early 2000s, kind of the 1990s. So I kind of want to put that, this diverse group was kind of doing this style above, other places that were getting more recognition. Some things I look at in emo, which I think are really interesting, I kind of did this last year, but I look at, the iconography and kind of the themes in the music genre. So birds are a big thing. Some things to note is like the kind of the beauty and the darkness of stuff. That's what emo kind of encapsulates. So their themes are going to have that. I think with also Y2K, the millennium, kind of the unknown, post 9/11, we're going to kind of see these kind of juxtapositions. So with the bird, a bird could be free, a bird could be trapped. There's these kind of things going on. So there's the beautiful nature of it, but the monstrous kind of side of it. You also have Greek mythology that I look at, like Icarus, going too close to the sun. There's a lot of sun imagery in emo. or the sky. So again, it's vastness and it's uncertainty. And also with my interviews with folks, they do mention some problematic things like stalking or violence or domestic violence. So we don't want to shy from that. And then there's some bands that are doing, having a very large female fan base, some bands that have gotten canceled because of certain things. So again, with the vastness, there's a lot of ocean, bands like Circus Survive, Silverstein. There's, again, this uncertainty. It could be the millennium, it could be Y2K, but you have like cryptids, monsters, with some bands, you have the robot. The robot is seen a lot in emo in the future, right? So there's this uncertainty and the vastness of the ocean, a lot of water and nautical themes. So this is kind of, before we get to the dancey stuff, there was a pivot. So emo kind of turns dance. But there was a really rich scene, especially in El Monte, the SGV, places like Hacienda Heights. You had bands like A Love Story, Athens in May, Deas and Dem. You had bands that were mixed, playing with punk bands or goth kind of bands. You had a stacked lineup with different kind of subgenres. But something to note too is that emos got beat up by the punks. So that is something that happened. This is my friend Evan's hat. Emos versus punks veteran, like a veteran of war. Because they were different. They were seen as too feminine, very different at the time. So the punks would beat up the emo kids. But you had this really rich history in LA and Southern California of these emo bands. Something I want to note too is that the SGV was a backdrop for emo. A lot of my friends in high school from Arroyo High School, El Monte, they were the background actors in the Helena music video by My Chemical Romance. This is Jasmine Rodriguez from El Monte. You could see they're literally in the Helena video. This church is in Los Angeles, so again, SGV and kids of color were the backdrop in emo music videos and in a lot of these shows. Something else is the venues that were around that often get forgotten here. Pomona, a big area, the Glass House, Fox Theater. In Azusa, it's not around anymore, but Smart City Grinds, Paramore played there. You have Thrash City and Monterey Park, some other Chain Reaction in the OC. But something to note is, again, the SGV, the mountains, they're the backdrops of the album art, the photography. That's Jimmy Eat World in front of the Glass House in Pomona. And then I just met, I'm like, that's like if you meet Madonna in pop music. I met Jeff from Thursday. He's like the big emo person, right? Really changed the game. Their song really changed and inspired a lot of kids in the SGV. But he said he loves LA, he loves SoCal. One of his biggest fan bases, also Jimmy Eat World, sold the most in Pomona merchandise. So they love SoCal. Jeff said that, kids in Mexico, when they go jueves. So, he loves the Latino community, and, this is going on during ICE and things like that. So some really rich history with that. Again, the fashion, I kind of mentioned this when I visited here last year, but again, we had to do what we had to do in the SGV, whether it was, boots were popular for emo and hipster kids. We used our grandpa or like our family's botas. We had to go to like the stores, the cowboy stores like that. There's these kind of certain things like the big graphics, the foxtails that comes from Japanese culture. We had to do our hair with these razors. We had to go to Goodwill, which was fashionable, that vintage look at the time. We literally had to go to the thrift stores. But one thing I want to know, especially since we're in the backyard of like Alhambra, are all the Catholic schools. A lot of my friends that went to the Catholic schools, they listened to indie and emo because that's all they could listen to. So they really shared that with us, the public school kids. But again, they had this kind of vintage style too with the having to dress in, uniforms and things like that. So okay, pivot. We're gonna get to the scene kids. The scene kids, I call it emo's Technicolor cousin or their neon cousin. Scene kids is another kind of subgenre that comes out with the rise of social media. It has similarities, but there's a touch of anime. There's a kawaii, a love for Japanese culture, the kind of cute kind of kawaii culture, the Harajuku street style of Japan. But it has, the severe haircuts of emo, the rise of social media. It is, right here you can't really see, but there's some differences. Emo's a little more introverted, more emotional, things like that, whereas scene is a little more extroverted. They're on social media, they have like flash and things to them. You're gonna see them more at the dance clubs that we're gonna talk about. So also, I look at remote intimacies, what the kids were doing, putting their feelings on these websites, these social media websites. Also, this is how you would find out about these dance clubs that I'm going to be talking about. Folks would put music in their away messages, on their screenings, things like that. So music played a really, the playlist of MySpace, they were a very intricate role with social media. Something else, sorry, I just wanted to show you the hair. This is me right here. But the scene queens, this is interesting. They're kind of like, I would say, they were treated kind of like the hair metal, the video vixen. They're kind of seen as the femme fatale. They were seen as the woe of the emo guys. Judith Valhalla talks about this. They're kind of like the party girls and things like that. But again, they were just really kind of packaged very kind of like just the bad femme fatale kind of thing, when that was not necessarily the case. There was the raccoon kind of streaks, the steps that are going on with the shaved hair. There's a certain look, right? It's a little more colorful and things like that. You have groups like the Millionaires that are kind of sharing that style, the big hair, kind of like this fashion. So indie sleaze, before we jump into the clubs, indie sleaze is kind of, I would say, the style of these clubs, the Bloghouse clubs of the time. This is your American Apparel. We live next to the old American Apparel factory. If folks have seen the documentary, it was very like scandalous. But that whole leotard, shiny disco pants, that really big thing in the mall, the hipster kind of stuff, this came from New York, this came from Williamsburg. And then you have a mix of what the kids call McBling, the Y2K kind of Paris Hilton-y style. There was all these mixes, but it's also vintage from New York, the Strokes, the Yeah-Yeahs. This is kind of the look, this love of Hello Kitty and things like that. But again, this was what you would see, this indie sleaze style you would see of the Bloghouse clubs. And another thing I want to know before we dive into the certain clubs is the 2000 aesthetic. So my question for this chapter is like, why the opulence, why the decadence? I was talking to my colleagues and I was like, why do the kids act like they're in The Great Gatsby? Like in the 2000s, like why, right? But again, there was reasons. There was a housing crisis. There was post 9/11, this uncertainty, some family members going to Iraq and things like that. So there was this need to want to act like everything was okay and like party and have fun. There's some other reasons why, but also the saturation of reality television. You have shows like the OC, The Hills. There was all these influences, social media, of course, branding. But I just want to show you all like the aesthetic of these clubs that we're going to look at. Clubs like The Heist, Dance. They're very neon, they're very cyberpunk, vaporwave. Folks are also looking to the 80s for that like extravagance. So that's where we see that in a lot of these flyers for the clubs. A lot of pastels. But they also get a lot of influence from, I think, the 90s, the house culture with pastiche, where they're mixing a bunch of different like materials together, or mixing medias. A lot of these flyers also have designer logos and monograms. So you see Chanel, you might see Fendi or Louis Vuitton, little things sprinkled in here. And it's kids from the SGV or East LA, right? But again, they want to feel opulent. They want to feel like they're luxurious as well. So here's exactly what I was saying. Right here, you have socialite heiress culture. You have the rise of the internet. Simultaneously, you have a big influence from hip hop. You have swag era coming in. You have crunk. This is from Cobra Starship, who mixes kind of disco and punk. You have Gabe that says, I want to be the emo Justin Timberlake. So that's how he wanted to look. You have the Millionaires that we saw earlier. They're, in a lot of their album art, they have money signs, diamonds, tiaras. There's this kind of want for decadence. And then again, we have, I think the moment that created that Lena Escobar says, the moment that made the blog clubs is Daft Punk at Coachella. That was like when blog clubs kind of came to be. Lena also discusses that in the SoCal area, the Los Angeles area, it was all kids of color that were the DJs, the promoters of these blog clubs. Something I want to note too, there's a lot of Asian influence as well. A lot of Asian or South Asian girls were the it girls of Southern California in these scenes. But then we have to think about kind of like whether there's the sexualization kind of, you have like these DJs right here, their name is, I don't think it says it right here, but Asian girls love it. So again, kind of problematic and things like that. But primarily you have a lot of DJs and promoters of color, Bulimiatron, very problematic names at this time. You have Hyphy Crunk, you have Paparazzi. Paparazzi lived in a house that they called the Bloghouse. And this is kind of where these clubs came to be. So I don't know, show of hands, have anybody seen these kind of photos in the past or on social media? It might be like a little, yeah. Okay, so again, the kids really enjoyed, like, you know, if your picture got chosen, that was awesome. Like for the time of MySpace, social media, like you were it. Like, because in your profile picture, you wanted people to come to your page, right? You wanted that kind of connection. So you had a limited time for people to be interested. So your picture had to be good. It had to be inviting. For, you know, somebody to go on your page, you had to have like a really good photo. But even the photographer kind of name or the club name, that was the equivalent of having a pin on your jacket or something like that. So again, this is in SoCal, Club Dance, Club Heist, Club Bang. You see kind of the emo style too. That's kind of what I'm focusing on, that a lot of the emo and scene kids came to these clubs. There's a mix of hip hop with it as well, but again, for the most part, you still had that emo aesthetic. The photography too, something I look at, I interviewed Sergio, who was Magnum XL. He was the photographer. He said that they copied Cobra Snake, who was like the one that kind of created this style, the raw, unfiltered photography, unedited. He just threw them in an album because it was too tedious to be sending them out. So this is how that kind of began. A lot of the photographers copied this style. But again, we didn't know we would lose all this. So that's something that Sergio says we lost a lot, you know, unless you backed it up. MySpace went away, Flickr, all these websites, PhotoBucket, you have to pay $5 now to get into. We lost all of our photos. But I do want to mention this awesome page. It's called, for my Latinos or like Chicanx folks, it's called Chunti Sleaze. So it's all the Pomona, it's all the SGV SoCal clubs with kids of color and like the big lasting kind of scene that was going on there. So here's some more, but something else with one of my interviewees, Alex. He said Pomona were the fashion shows. So all the scene kids, all the queer kids, all the females were the ones lifting up the fashion. Pomona was where the big fashion shows were. And then in my time in the Inland Empire, this is my friend Jace I worked with at Starbucks. He tells me about the Inland Empire equivalent. There was a Club Avenue. I'm not gonna read all this to you, but he said, you know, my claim to fame was the pop-up clubs that have no social footprint. Me and my friends would get our drinks, go to from Starbucks, put some alcohol in it. We would go to the club. This is when, you know, phones didn't have that kind of technology. So somebody was taking the digital cameras, taking photos of you. And this is like the funniest part of it. He says, I would look, you know, days later, oh, if I was that bitch that week, my photos got posted. Like I loved it. So again, you would have to wait days for your photos to be posted on there. But he calls himself the IE's It Girl. I love it. But again, we would go to Club VIP, Club Menagerie, so that queer nightlife. Also, these kind of scene clubs were happening at the same time in Riverside. So I'm going to show you a couple quick things. This kind of goes in the backyards, especially in places like Compton, El Monte, Arcadia, different places. There's kids that are in bands playing electro punk. So they get inspired by these nightclubs, and they're playing kind of, you know, the Bloghouse style. They're doing mashups of bands like Yeah Yeah Yeahs, Death from Above 1979, Shiny Toy Guns that we saw in the beginning of my presentation. But they're using synths, punk drums. I knew somebody that used a DVD player to be a DJ in the backyard. They were like connecting it to, I don't know, whatever we had, cable at the time, and they were just being a DJ in the back, in our like little party that we did. And so something that Alex mentioned is that, you know, backyard, Debbie Deb, the kind of rebel, the house culture of the 1990s, it exposed all that stuff. So whether it was subconscious to a lot of the younger generation or not, it kind of brought out that love of dancing. So again, we grew up, he says something about at the cooking asada or whatever, but like dancing to those kind of house 90s rebel music. We grew up with that, our tias, our tios, our moms, our dads. So that's been ingrained in our DNA, is that dance culture from the house and rebel scenes. So I want to share some bands of the SGV. This is one, they're covering Death from Above 1979. And again, with the names, you can see the very dancey scene kind of name, Zap the Abomination. This is them setting up, having kind of keyboard in El Monte or somewhere. And you can see it was a big thing, but this is their cover of a song. One more, I'm going to share another band. They're a female-led band, Kill the Nurse. Again, you see what the names. This was a really important band in this area. They're playing that dancey punk. Okay, and then so I just kind of want to give you some last couple quick kind of what you would hear at the blog clubs. This is kind of what my presentation is named after, the Justice song. So this is kind of what you would hear at the blog clubs, sometimes remixed, mashed up. This song's called Dance.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Sing to the BEAC, get ready to ignite. You were such a frequency, catching all the lights. Just easy as ABC, that's how you make it right. The DAC, sing to the BEAC, just easy as ABC. The dance, the way you move is so deep.
And then I just kind of wanted to show really quick. Let's see, here's just another one really quick that you can hear kind of the Bloghouse. make sure I have it. The Millionaires, I mentioned them earlier, but just to kind of see, they kind of have like a Beastie Boys cadence, kind of playful, but the scene queen kind of aesthetic of the scene kid. You can see the decadence right here of the 2000s.
It's time to party. Chop it down, you get real naughty. Don't talk shit, we don't care. We'll take off our underwear. Drinking cocktails, it's the fun. All these guys will she's a dime. I'm just winking low to kiss while other girls just bitch and diss. Come get fucked up. Give me my alcohol. Let's get fucked up. ALCOH, get fucked up. Give me the alcohol. Let's get fucked up.
Okay, and something to note too, the members are Asian. Again, it's like very heavy Asian, South Asian, like the scene girls, Latinx, folks of color. We're kind of running the show in SoCal. Let's see. Okay. So some of the bands that I mentioned, we saw Zap the Abomination, Disco Dyslexic, again the names. But you have this very electro-punk thing going on in the backyards. Here's some photos of it, kind of literally in the backyards with the keyboards, with the DJ setup. But again, it was a vibe, it was an aesthetic. You see like kind of the yacht, kind of like sailor hat. So there was this luxury, this the handkerchiefs, things like that, the scarves. So again, a lot of reasons why this kind of collapsed. So I think Lena Escobar mentions that it was kind of gonna explode. There was just so many things going on. You got with, a lot of these clubs run from folks of color. You had big entities come in, big kind of concert promoters and things like that. They saw what they liked. And then you have EDC and EDM come in. They're really interested. They want to do it on a bigger scale. The one thing that I read that was really interesting, what they said is that you get from the party all around to the DJ on the stage and that kind of distance and the folks watching the DJ. So it becomes a spectacle instead of the big party all around. It's kind of everybody going to watch the DJ, which to each their own, but it kind of took that punkness out. Or that kind of dancey kind of thing. And a lot of the DJs were punks, Steve Aoki, a lot Frankie Chan, like a lot of these people were, they were punks to start out with. You also have, the saturation of streaming coming out. In pop, everybody's kind of doing this style. They're doing, whether it's with David Guetta or all these pop stars that are kind of doing this style. Interesting, somebody's, they're asking like what killed kind of like this Bloghouse stuff. And in Lena's book, it says, somebody just said, Will I Am. That's all they said, like, Will I Am, yeah. So again, you have your Kesha's coming out, Lady Gaga, but Lady Gaga kind of paid her dues in New York. But again, you just have this saturation. And then, yes, what somebody says in Lena's book as well, the Horsemen of the Apocalypse, LMFAO, come out. That's what they call it. So again, it's lost its kind of edge, its punkness. Social media, MySpace kind of gets sold. All these things kind of go away. There's questionable behaviors again, even amongst the photographer community, underage type of stuff. Gonna call it out. And then again, yeah, we lose MySpace. We lose all of these websites. So this is one of my chapters for my dissertation. I kind of want to show that pivot where emo becomes dancey and you have the scene kids. I kind of focus more on the scene kids that are at these kind of clubs. But again, it was a time. You had the Heist, you had Club Bang, Moscow, you had, every night had a club. And then if you go to the Inland Empire, they had a club. You go to Pomona, they had matinee. So again, it was all these kids coming together to dance, to forget about the woes of the 2000s, to feel luxurious, to feel decadent. So yeah, thank you, and thank you all for listening to me.
Are there any questions? Okay, are you open to
Yeah.
ask? Okay.
I'll start.
Sure.
Just to get us started. I'm still learning about emo. I don't want to age myself. I'm from the 80s punk and 90s kind of rave and dance music, house music, more house music. But anyways, I'm fascinated by emo. I like the iconography and imagery, but that was kind of your warm-up. But This notion of, can you speak more about the contrast with punks? You said they're kind of clashing, but I see it as, or what struck me was, obviously the emo is emotional, and then you said mysterious, introverted. And to me, thought sensitive, and then you had sensitized or sensitive.
Oh yeah, it was spelled, that's
But yeah,
something,
like,
yeah.
but you know, it's like the opposite to me, or what do you think? Am I right in that it's opposite or antithesis of like a stoic or a macho or the angry punk? You know, with the
Yeah.
steel-toed shoes and the mosh pit?
Yeah, I
Can you
think,
explain it more for those of us
Yeah.
who are still learning?
yeah, from what the people that I interviewed, so a couple musicians and things, they shared that why like the punks beat up the emos, or they just didn't understand. It was so weird to them. It was so different.
Yeah.
Could have been the skinny girl pants. It could have been, you know, the feminism. But a lot of the emo bands, even the popular ones, they took a lot from queer culture. There's even this kind of sasscore that I forgot to mention, sasscore and electropunk, and the bands that some of them that we've seen with the skinny girl pants. I mean, you're bending genders. So they didn't understand it, and I guess maybe the emotional, I know that there were in Mexico, there were the riots and the things that a lot of folks document between the punks and the emos. I think it was because, yeah, punk has that kind of cynical, like angry, aggressive thing, you know, and they just don't understand it. And something my son said, I thought was so brilliant, my little son, he said, you know, punk is, or metals, I'm gonna give you pain, like that, you know, that's what metal's about. Punk is like, the government's paining us, let's go get it. And then my son said, he's all, emo is, I feel pain, you pain me, I'm gonna pain myself. So again, it's just this, you know, just difference of how to put out your feelings and things like that. They just didn't understand. I exchanged clothes with a friend in high school. I had a cardigan or leather jacket, I don't remember, but you know, very like small kind of clothing. And we got called the F word by a jock, both of us, and I was like ready to fight, and they're like, you're not, like, they're gonna beat me up, don't do anything. But again, just because of having very different clothing, like the tight pants, or like very, you know, whatever the case may be. So I think it was just something different. And another person I interviewed, X-Teen, she's a musician, she was more on the emo pop punk side, but she said when the scene girls came to her school, she's all, what's that? And she's all, it was like Valley Girl mixed with punk. So again, that's kind of that decadent kind of SoCal, we see with the millionaires, that kind of, oh my God, like kind of thing that the scene girls have. So I think it was just not understanding each other. But I think now, folks look back and they're all, yeah, that's kind of messed up what we did, like, sorry, like, you know, but for the time, I think it's just not understanding each other.
I'll just add, I don't want to take up the time, but I mean, the more things change, they stay the same. The Midnighters, the cholos back then chased them down the street, called them F-word because they had tight,
Yeah.
skinny suit, you know, tight pants and long hair, whatever.
Yeah, so, and then the rebels had, you know, the eyebrows all, so again, we all take from queer culture, come on, like, but it's just, yeah, so I think that's, but, yes.
Thank you for this. I came of age in the 2000s, and then so I was emo in that time. And then like in college, it was a whole Bloghouse, right? But I really like your comment where you said about how like these punks became DJs, because I always think, like, oh, what happened to, for so many people, I was like, what happened to emos? And I was like, well, some of them became ravers.
Yeah, definitely.
And I was like, I always felt Study more for that, you know, Skrillex, you know, because I feel like he was in this emo scene, and then like suddenly you turn around and like he's like, oh, he's becoming like this like very like EDM DJ that just became really big really quickly. I feel we all kind of gravitated towards that.
Yeah, definitely. There is that kind of like, I haven't yet explored that, but there's definitely this pipeline to raver culture and stuff. Some of the folks that I did interview, they got into EDC and that kind of stuff. A good quote that they said is that a lot of the younger generation, they weren't taught properly like the peace, love, unity, and respect. So it's a little dark, like a lot of these young kids that went to the first kind of raves in the 2000s, or the big kind of events, some fatally kind of like stuff happened. So again, it's really important to, you know, take care of the younger generation and teach them the ways and things like that. But again, I think the corporate, we're looking like, oh, we can make our money and stuff like that. You have young kids go all ages, and it's a little too much to handle sometimes. So it's really important for the older generation to like really take care of them. But yeah, there's definitely that kind of like move to EDM and stuff. Yeah. Do we have more time? Or?
Yeah, you have time.
Okay, any, yes.
Thank you again for the presentation. One thing that I remember from this era too, and from like maybe just the indie scene in general, was also, I mean, you mentioned like luxuriating or luxury, but I also remember like a deep sense of irony with a lot of stuff. So like when you showed the image of like the guy in like the sailor hat, I felt like a lot of people were wearing things like really ironically, right? Where it was like they're wearing like military stuff or brands that you wouldn't like necessarily associate with like alternative cultures, but it was like ironically done. So I wonder if you thought more about like the use of irony in the scene too, right? As another way to think about too, like the things that people are like wearing, or like the brands, or I remember like in the early 2000s when like PBR beer was like a big thing in the scene.
Yeah, Rolling Rock and all those. Yeah.
Like even that seemed like an ironic like drink choice.
Yeah.
That time.
And yeah, the vintage look and like the thrifted look on Melrose or Robertson Avenue, that it's like $200 that it looks like I go to the thrift store, right? Like,
Yeah.
so yeah, no, that's something I will definitely look at. The other thing too is that I want to pronounce it correctly, excuse my ignorance, but the kaifa scarf, that was big too. And now if you wear that, that's a political statement, Free Palestine. But like that is something that you have, you know, that's different in this context now is that like if you were to wear that, and that was like an accessory in the 2000s, the scarf, the you know, the black and white, it was just as an accessory. Again, there's meaning to that. So there's some questionable things here too. And yeah, I was just really interested in that question, like why the luxury, why this kind of thing? And I think it was just this uber saturation, social media, brand yourself, like Lena Escobar says. You have this little moment, you better brand yourself, you know, and kind of get people to come to your page or whatever the case is. So, yeah. Yeah. Anybody? Sorry, I can't see. So if anybody, okay, awesome. Thank you guys. Thank you, Cal State. Thank you.
Thank you, Kristen.
Thank you.